What if one photograph could freeze the exact moment when power, betrayal, and loyalty collided? In 1998, the world watched as President Bill Clinton stood before the nation, forcefully denying an affair with Monica Lewinsky. But look closer at this image. Behind him, Hillary Clinton's face tells a different story. Calm on the surface, yet her eyes reveal the weight of humiliation, resilience, and political calculation. This was more than a marriage under fire. It was the survival of an entire presidency. A single snapshot capturing the silence behind the words and the history hidden in plain sight. Imagine reaching for medicine to soothe a cough, only to discover it was laced with cannabis, chloroform, and even morphine. This is not a joke. This was real medicine in the 1930s. Called one-night cough syrup, it promised relief, but in reality, it was a chemical cocktail strong enough to knock someone unconscious. At a time when regulations were weak and trust was blind, people unknowingly consumed substances we now consider dangerous drugs. This bottle isn't just a relic. It's a chilling reminder of how far medicine has come and how close danger once sat in every home. What happens when sworn enemies are forced to sit at the same table? In 1971, civil rights activist and Atwater and Ku Klux Klan leader C.P. Ellis were brought together in Durham, North Carolina, to resolve bitter tensions over school integration. For 10 tense days, their meetings were filled with hostility, mistrust, and anger. But against all odds, something extraordinary happened. Ellis tore up his Klan card, renounced his hate, and chose a life of equality. This photograph doesn't just capture two people working. It marks the moment when dialogue shattered hatred and turned enemies into allies for justice. What if feeding hungry children was seen as dangerous? In 1969, the Black Panther Party launched free breakfast programs, serving thousands of kids across America before school. To struggling families, it was hope on a plate. But to the FBI, it was a threat. Agents labeled it subversive, and in some cities, police stormed kitchens, smashed food, and even urinated on supplies, determined to destroy what they could not control. This photograph captures more than breakfast. It reveals a battle over dignity, justice, and the terrifying truth of how far power will go to silence compassion. Think Oreo was the first chocolate sandwich cookie? Think again. Long before Oreo dominated grocery aisles, there was Hydrox, born in 1908, a full 4 years earlier. It was the original cream-filled chocolate cookie, beloved by families for decades. But history can be cruel. Despite being first, Hydrox was overshadowed, mocked as a knockoff of the very brand that copied it. This ad is more than clever marketing. It's a snapshot of a forgotten giant, proof that sometimes the true originals are erased by better branding. Hydrox wasn't just a cookie, it was the underdog history almost left behind. What if greatness could be seen in a single teenage glance? This 1960s yearbook photo shows a young Sigourney Weaver, long before Alien made her an icon of strength on screen. Under her name, she wrote a haunting line: "Please, God, please, don't let me be normal." It wasn't just teenage rebellion, it was a prophecy. Decades later, Weaver would redefine what a female lead could be in Hollywood, breaking molds and inspiring generations. This picture isn't just a memory. It's the moment before a girl who didn't want to be normal became extraordinary. Can you imagine trusting your child's life to this? In the 1950s, before airbags, before modern seatbelts, parents strapped their babies into car seats that looked more like dinner chairs balanced on the edge of a dashboard. This smiling child represents an era when safety was more about convenience than protection, and crashes often turned deadly. Yet, at the time, this was marketed as innovation. Looking back, it feels unthinkable, but it reminds us how far we've come, and how what once seemed normal can now look like playing with fate inside a moving car. What if defending your own life meant being sentenced to death? In 1948, Rosa Ingram and her two teenage sons were condemned to George's electric chair after a white neighbor tried to sexually assault her. They fought back and killed him. But in the Jim Crow South, justice was not blind. This haunting photo shows a mother and her children behind bars, awaiting execution for an act of survival. Their case sparked outrage, ignited protests, and exposed the brutal reality of racial injustice. It wasn't just a trial, it was a chilling reminder of whose lives were valued and whose were not. Before radar, war sounded very different. In the 1920s, strange machines like this, called acoustic locators, were used to detect enemy aircraft by listening for the faint hum of engines miles away. Soldiers would stand inside these towering devices, straining their ears against the sky, knowing a missed sound could mean disaster. It looks almost alien today, but back then it was cutting-edge technology, born from fear of surprise attacks. This eerie photograph reminds us how human ingenuity often emerges from desperation, and how fragile safety felt in an age when survival depended on listening to the wind. What does it mean to show love in the shadow of fear? In 1946, two Red Army soldiers shared a kiss beneath the looming portrait of Joseph Stalin, a man whose regime punished dissent and demanded absolute loyalty. To the outside world, this might look like a moment of tenderness, but in Stalin's Soviet Union, even gestures of affection could be seen as defiance. This photograph captures a striking paradox: the warmth of human connection framed against the cold gaze of a dictator. It's a reminder that even under oppression, love finds a way to exist, quietly but powerfully. What does it take to become a legend in war? In 1939, at just 24 years old, Soviet sniper Lyudmila Pavlichenko joined the Red Army. Within 2 years, she had 309 confirmed kills, 36 of them enemy snipers. Feared on the battlefield, she became one of the most lethal marksmen in history. Yet when she visited the United States, reporters didn't ask about her courage or skill. They asked if she wore makeup at the front. Her answer was unforgettable. There is no rule that a girl cannot look good while shooting. A warrior, a woman, and a legend forever. What if becoming a woman meant enduring years of pain? Among the Ainu people of Japan, girls began lip tattoos as young as 7. Using soot and repeated cuts, with no anesthesia, the ritual continued for years, growing darker with age until it framed the mouth in bold lines. It wasn't fashion, it was identity, protection, and a sacred step before marriage. But by 1871, Japan outlawed the practice, nearly erasing a tradition that had survived for centuries. This haunting photograph captures not just ink on skin, but the resilience of a culture fighting to keep its stories alive. This grainy image is believed to be the last known photograph of Adolf Hitler, taken in the final days of April 1945. Frail, hunched, and defeated, he steps outside the Führer bunker in Berlin, surveying a world he once sought to dominate, now collapsing around him. The man who unleashed a war that claimed tens of millions of lives was reduced to a shadow, clinging to delusion as Soviet forces closed in. Within days, he would be dead by his own hand. This picture captures the fall of tyranny, not in a blaze of glory, but in silence and ruin. What does courage look like in a crown? In 1971, Cheryl Brown walked onto the Miss America stage as the first African-American contestant in the pageant's history. At a time when the civil rights movement was still raw and segregation scars ran deep, her presence wasn't just about beauty, it was about breaking barriers. Every step she took challenged a system that had excluded women who looked like her for decades. This photograph isn't just a portrait of elegance. It's a reminder that sometimes history changes not with protest signs, but with a smile, a gown, and undeniable grace. Step inside New York City's subway in the 1970s, and you entered a world of chaos and grit. Graffiti covered every inch of the cars, crime rates soared, and the system felt more like an underground battleground than public transit. Yet, even here, life carried on. Kids reading books, workers heading home, strangers sharing the same ride. This photo captures that paradox, decay and danger, but also resilience and routine. The subway was loud, unpredictable, and sometimes terrifying, but for millions of New Yorkers, it was simply a part of daily survival in a city that never stopped moving. May 1945, Prague. The war was over, but vengeance had just begun. In the aftermath of Nazi occupation, ethnic Germans were rounded up and forced to repair the very streets torn apart during the conflict. Once symbols of privilege under the Reich, they now stood as prisoners of history, shamed and exposed before their former victims. This photograph captures more than rubble being cleared. It shows the brutal reversal of power, the thin line between justice and revenge. In these faces, you see the cost of war, humiliation, anger, and the haunting truth that peace rarely arrives without pain. At first glance, this may look like an ordinary 19th century family portrait, but look closer, and you see a story of resilience and pride. Taken in 1890, it captures a couple of little people with their newborn child, dressed in their finest clothes, standing tall in spirit, if not in stature. In an era when people with dwarfism were often exploited or ridiculed in circuses and sideshows, this photograph defied those cruel stereotypes. It showed dignity, love, and the quiet courage of creating a normal life in a world that rarely offered acceptance. A rare glimpse of strength behind the lens. A simple photograph, yet it speaks volumes about the collapse of a regime. Taken inside Hitler's bunker in Berlin, 1945, it shows a Nazi officer's cap lying abandoned on the floor, the skull insignia still glaring even in defeat. Around this place, the walls once echoed with orders that shaped the fate of millions. Now silence. The Reich that promised 1,000 years had crumbled in just 12. This image isn't just about a hat. It's about the end of tyranny, the fragility of power, and how history remembers even the symbols left behind in the rubble of downfall. War can strip away everything, except the will to survive. In this rare photograph from the Winter War, a Finnish general interrogates a Soviet soldier freshly captured, still cloaked in his improvised camouflage of leaves and branches. The soldier's disguise, once meant to blend him into the frozen forests, now makes him stand out as a prisoner. Between them hangs the silence of war, one man victorious, the other defeated. This moment isn't just about capture. It's about the brutal chess game of survival in sub-zero wilderness, where every twig, every shadow, and every heartbeat could decide life or death.